Hello and welcome to the first of what is hopefully many videos in my class about psychology. And of course, since we're going to be beginning with psychology, the first place to begin is here about why studying psychology. And we're going to start with some definitions, some basic goals of psychology, so be sure you're following along in your learning targets. And without further ado, let's get started. Psychology. Let's start with the definition of why we're here. The study of behavior and mental processes. And that study is scientific. So if you hear people out there saying that psychology is not a science, that is incorrect. We use the scientific method just like any other science out there. Now, we have to define and get an operational definition of behavior and mental processes. What are those? Behavior is outward. It is what you can visibly see a person doing. Sometimes not even visibly seeing, but walking, talking, facial expressions, sleeping. You can view a person sleeping. Sometimes that's a little creepy though. And eating. Any outward behavior that they are doing is considered behavior. Now, mental processes, however, are inward. They are cognitive activities in your brain, dreams, perceptions of the world, which we all have different ones, thoughts, memories, anything else that happens inside the mind. Emotions are a little bit different because emotions affect both behavior and your mental processes, and we're going to study those separate. But when studying emotions, psychologists come up with what we've called psychological constructs, and we've done this throughout history. Like, what do you get? What is the feeling that you get when you think of love, frustration, anger? You know, these are all words that we use to describe certain feelings and emotions that we have as humans. Now that we've got our definitions of what psychology is, the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, just to review, we are going to talk about the 4 goals of psychology. And our first one is describing, or what is happening. It is how you observe a behavior and noting everything about it, everything that is visibly observable. So what is happening, where it's happening, to whom it's happening, and under what circumstances is it happening. And our running example I'm going to be using is a little girl in a 2nd grade classroom who suddenly her grades are slipping, she doesn't turn in her homework, and she's developing a very negative attitude towards school. That's only what is happening. Now we move on to the next step, is why that is happening. Explaining why something is happening is very important in forming theories. So to figure out why this girl is suddenly changing her behavior, they may take her to a pediatrician to make sure it's nothing health related. They may give her some tests in school to figure out if it is something cognitive. They also may take her to a a school psychologist to figure out what the problem is. The point is that we are trying to find out an explanation or a theory of why that is happening, and we'll get into the differences between theories and laws here in a second. After we explain the behavior or why it is happening, we try to predict when it will happen, and that is determining what will happen in the future. So this little girl who has developed a very negative attitude towards school, we may find that based on a similar situation, she will have a hard time concentrating and continue this pattern of behavior unless an intervention is unless an intervention is done. And that brings us to our last step of psychology, which is controlling the behavior. We want to change it. How can we change it? How can we control it? That is focusing on changing the behavior from the undesirable behavior, which is not turning in homework, negative attitudes, to desirable ones, which would obviously be the opposite of those. And these are the four goals of psychology, but not all psychologists necessarily use those all of the time. Now, that brings us to why psychology is a science. And you can tell this to all of the naysayers out there. It is actually a social science or a social study that is rooted in the natural sciences. So social sciences are the study of people and their systems, and those include history, anthropology, economics, political science or government, and sociology, or the study of groups of people and societies. The natural sciences, which you've been taking your whole life, are biology, chemistry, and physics, or any number of combinations or subfields of those. Some areas of psychology and some different perspectives of psychology are really rooted very closely to those natural sciences. And both of psychologists and natural scientists use the scientific method to do their work to eliminate observer bias. And observer bias is when the observer is expecting to see something, so they only see that, or they may skew their results towards. And finally, in this first section, we're going to give you a quick overview of research and theories. And ways we do research in psychology are surveys and experimentation. Surveys like a paper-based, you've probably all taken surveys just to answer some questions, and we'll get into why those are there are some downfalls to that. We'll get into those later. But some psychologists really rely on surveys as a quick and easy way to gather information from a large group of people. And psychological experimentation involves people and animals most of the time. And some psychologists believe that, for example, studying on monkeys, which are very close to humans in the evolutionary chain, we can take that data and apply it to humans. And psychologists, after they do their research, they organize those findings into theories. So in psychology, we use theories. It's very, very rare that you will ever come across a psychological law, because a theory is a statement that attempts to explain why things work the way they do. There's no way to prove a theory correct in psychology, but theories help psychologists form principles. And a principle is a law or a basic truth. Now, a lot of times you'll see theories in psychology instead of laws, and that's because it's very, very hard to prove any of the theories of psychology correct. Psychology is changing all the time, and it's a very, very young profession or science. It's only been around 150, 160 years or so, and we'll get into that in our next section, the history of psychology, combining my two favorite things. And so I'll be really ready to talk about that one. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in class.